Hi, I'm Cece Sykes, and I'm coming into you from Chicago here in the States. And I want to give you a little overview of the workshop I'll be doing for PCPSI April 14th and 15th. So coming right up. This workshop is going to be combining information around internal family systems and how to use that model and sort of get you familiar a little bit with the internal family systems psychotherapy model, and then also in particular, how we use the internal family systems model to approach addictive processes. The third part of the workshop will also be used. I'll be giving you some experiential exercises so you can kind of experiment with this model and see what it feels like to actually do it yourself. And these are things that perhaps even some could be tried with clients depending upon how you feel about it. So first, let me just give you a little overview. Internal family systems is an experiential psychotherapy model that was developed in the 1980s by Richard Schwartz here, who is from the Chicago area. And he was working actually with women with disordered eating primarily and in a research project. And out of sort of a sense of frustration, he kind of asked his clients, why don't you have this part that binges, talk to this part that purges? And he began to have his clients and realize they had a huge inner critic, also involved in these kinds of inner dialogues. He realized that they had vulnerability, memories from the past of their childhood that impacted the eating. So things that we know about, dynamics that we know about, attachment wounds and other kinds of challenges that they were working with. He began to see that when he had a client connect to these different parts of themselves, holding different ideas, different strategies, different roles, different memories, in sort of that interior kind of mindfulness way of just observing and listening, but dialoguing, not just detaching. He found that people actually gained information, and also it's a form of regulation. So that the way IFS works is that when we sort of separate out and teach our clients how to detach and differentiate from different aspects or roles of ourselves, we teach them new information, how to connect, and also they experience some regulation, some calming of their system as this occurs. Now, this model, many of you may have heard about it. You might be on this call so that you can hear more about IFS because you've heard something around it. It's been out for, as I said, they first developed it in the 1980s. The book he wrote was in the mid-90s, and it's been taught all over the world at this point. I'm a senior trainer with Internal Family Systems Institute, and I've been teaching the model and involved with the Institute since the late 1990s. So this model is something that I've become to know and love very much. And as I learned about it, I also became interested in particular on how it can be used to work with addictive processes. This has been very much a part of my journey as a psychotherapist to work with trauma, to work with, very early on what we called survivors from complex family trauma. And also in my personal life and in my family life, extended family, and in my work life, I've worked with so many people who are recovering from some kind of trauma and recovering from some kind of addictive processes. So this is a personal love of mine and how to use this model to apply principles that are helpful and have compassion, but also clarity for someone who's stuck in the using process is really, really important to me. So in this workshop, you're going to hear some of the basic concepts of internal family systems. You're going to also learn some basic concepts about how to apply internal family systems to some kinds of addictive processes. And the third aspect of it, you'll have in the experience of the model itself. I'll give you some experiential exercises, some visualizations that you can try. And then we'll discuss them to see, and you can ask questions about them. A little more about the IFS model. it's, views the internal world in a systemic way. What does that mean? It means that different parts or aspects of ourselves relate to one another. And you can imagine this sort of like the more you work, or the harder or longer you work, the more you might feel like you deserve a break, right? Or the harder that you're working to overcome anxieties, actually you're creating new anxieties in this process, right? There's a part of you that says, I can't be anxious about this. And then another part feels less and less understood and more compelled to involve in certain processes. So when we look at the systems involved in internal family systems and addictive processes, it's really clarifying to look at these categories of parts that people have and how they work together. In internal family systems, they take all of the myriad aspects and functioning of our lives and divides it into three basic groups. A group of proactive, high functioning or functioning parts called managers, a group of vulnerable parts, the parts that hold our basic humanity, our sensitivity, our caring, and also our memories around the past, good and not so good, called our exiles, and a third group of parts called firefighters or distractors. And those are our parts that help us have rest and relaxation, and also can become compulsive, though, if we have a lot of inner pain and use substances or practices in a compulsive kind of way. So these three groups of parts, managers, firefighters, and exiles, interact with one another over the course and develop over the course of our lifetime. We're born with a temperament, with a certain kind of personality, but our experiences, our family experiences, our experiences in community, our experiences outside of family, losses and other kinds of adversive childhood experiences, right? The ACE scores, these kinds of experiences all impact how our parts develop. And for some of us, our parts develop in a sort of patterned way where we learn how to escape or how to soothe or how to find comfort in extreme ways. And for other of us, we learn to become very, very hard on ourselves or very, very perfectionistic as a way also to cope and to feel better about ourselves. So the IFS model looks at sort of early experiences, how they develop into childhood and adulthood, and helps clients begin to look at their own process in a way that gives them some new information, that gives them some compassion, and that helps them in a really safe way connect to old and more traumatized memories. Because when we've learned this process a little bit, and when our clients are a little more comfortable with this process, that doing the process actually is regulating to their system, so that then when they begin to look at sort of traumatic or early memories, they can do this from a more regulated place. So this is sort of this overall process of IFS psychotherapy model and what it looks like. So I'll talk, of course, it takes, a training for IFS is many hours. However, I'm going to give you guys some core concepts so you have a real sense of grounding the IFS model and how some basic assumptions and basic concepts. Now, when we take those basic assumptions and we take those basic concepts and we apply them to our clients with addictive processes, that will be the other part of this workshop. Now, for me, I barely even use the word addict or addiction. I mean, I need to, of course, to offer clarity about the general topic area. But for me, I don't think of those processes in that way of someone has an addiction or has become an addict. For me, those labels don't really fully explain or describe someone who's suffering with a compulsive set of practices or behaviors and what's really happening internally for them. For me, there's just so much inner conflict, and I'm sure you can relate to this, perhaps in your own life or with people you love or with your clients. And it's, for substances, for disordered eating, for gambling, for porn preoccupations. These are all things that many of our clients suffer from. Some of my clients say, or some of my colleagues say, well, I don't really work with addiction. I go, really? So you don't have any clients that sometimes drink too much, or sometimes get obsessed with food, or sometimes have just sexual preoccupations, or have ended up gambling, sports betting, all of this. You know, we spend billions of dollars in this country, in the UK, Ireland, Europe, on all of these behaviors. So that I don't think when we're working with clients, we don't have to wait until they've become an addict and have reached some sort of level of dysfunction to talk with our clients about how they have resourced themselves, how they try to comfort or relax themselves using substances or practices, and how they can do that in a way that's not so harmful. So what we're going to talk about is just a whole sort of continuum, really, between people who are struggling with something a little bit and people who perhaps have been struggling for a long time. But the question really is, when you're sitting in the psychotherapy hour and you're the counselor, you're the therapist, what can you say to really help reach someone, help someone be effective with someone without shaming them, without managing them, and without being in a power struggle with them? So we like that idea. We all say, I want to treat the whole person. But how do we do that? And how do we do that without engaging in power struggles and other kinds of approaches that really have been involved in treatment of addictive processes for a long time, in terms of eating contracts, in terms of sobriety or nothing. If you're not sober, then you can't be in this program. And, you know, these kinds of policies that are set up to try to create a safe container, but sometimes end up shaming or limiting someone's ability to really actually feel safe enough to look at their own behaviors. So with this model, what I'll be talking with you about is how we take these categories of parts, what managers look like and sound like, the perfectionism, the judgment, the inner contempt when there's an addictive process, what the firefighters and distractors and escape artists sound like, you know, as they try to defend the need, you know, the parts that say, I have to do this. I don't feel like I have a choice anymore. And if I don't do this, something's gonna fall apart. It'd be easier to stay together doing it than to not do it. Those kinds of parts, and how we can help our clients work with those parts of themselves, as well as what we know is shame and attachment wounds and perhaps other kinds of early trauma that may have occurred in someone's lives. How can we help someone who's not very regulated even identify what might be underneath their using behavior? They forgot how they started using. It's like it's been so long ago they don't remember anymore. All they're doing is being on survival mode. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to look at that system and how, as a clinician, to help your client sort of organize and simplify that system. The third thing that we're going to talk about is just doing some experiential exercises. What does that mean when I say look inside and find a part? What does that mean when I say there's an inner conflict inside between using, don't use, do it, don't do it, eat, don't eat, call my guy, don't call my guy. You know, that inner conflict, someone with addictive processes is cycling around that kind of inner dialogue, perhaps a few times a day, certainly a few times a week. And how do we help them? How do we help the clinicians step into the middle of that inner conversation and work with them? The other thing that happens around working with addictive processes, of course, is that it impacts the clinician. People get involved in behavior that feels scary, it's self-harming, they're at risk, people around them perhaps are at risk. What does the therapist do? How do we work with our own parts that are feeling fearful or feeling a need to be in control of them? How do we work with people who are feeling reactive, feeling angry, feeling hopeless? So in IFS, the parts of someone that are angry, that are reactive, that are resistant, that don't want to be told what to do, these are very common parts of people who are struggling with different addictive processes. So we talk about how can we as a clinician work with the client in a way where they we're not having to be in control of their behavior, which we know is not possible, but we're not in that role of manager of their behavior, but instead can invite them to collaborate with us, invite them to into the clinical process, rather than be the recipient of the process and, you know, what are you going to do to me, or what's going to happen here? But how can we invite people to be involved in the process? I think for me, what I've loved about using this model with any kinds of addictive processes, and I've used them with all different kinds of situations, is the idea that I have a sort of roadmap in my head. I don't know how the therapy is going to ultimately work out. I don't know what's going to happen in every session, but I have kind of a roadmap in my mind about so that when someone's talking with me, I kind of hear what sort of part they're talking from, and I can kind of help them predict and begin to sort of see the patterns of their behaviors. And when people see the patterns, we talk about a trigger, but we can talk about a trigger is just one part of a pattern of someone's using to cope. That pattern of use for a while, feel bad about myself, get back on track, or work very hard, get very perfectionistic, feel exhausted and worthless or isolated, and then have to deserve to treat myself. You know, people have various patterns that they use. I keep doing this because it's sort of like the system. I draw the system as a triangle, which I'll share with you. And when we help clients sort of see this map, this roadmap of their own, and learn how to draw it, learn how to sit with it, learn how to bring it home, work with it, and begin to feel a sense of empowerment for themselves, a sense of choice about what they're doing, rather than feel, compulsive and hopeless and unable, or feeling shame, or also feeling like they can't talk about something. So what I love about using this model is a sense of a roadmap. And the second thing I love about this model is this idea of teaching both the clinician and the client to be able to come from a place of compassion. Now, by compassion, I don't mean just passively saying everything's okay. That's not what compassion is in this model, or the way we view it. Compassion is the sense that I care, I'm here with you, I'm going to journey this with you, and I believe in you. I believe that not only you have parts, but you also have that sense of inner knowing, that sense of inner, in IFS we call it self, you can call it self, soul, or just a place of regulation inside yourself. You can get regulated again. Sometimes it's just for a few minutes of at a time, but teaching incremental abilities to regulate, to check yourself, to pause. I think this is, and to, in those pauses, to begin to have some clarity about what's happening and a sense of compassion for one's own experience is really powerful. It allows me as a clinician to not feel like I'm responsible for my client's behavior, but I am responsible for how I can connect to them and what I can offer them. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. In my experience, so many people, by the time they come to see a therapist, or they're coming to see somebody because they just got out of a treatment center, or perhaps you're someone who works in a treatment center and you're looking for some new ideas for what to say and what to do, in your in-person treatment, in residential or something. For me, what I like is to be able to help my clients feel like they have a sense of agency in their own healing process, and a sense that I am not I'm not here to tell them what to do. I'm not here to be in charge of their recovery process, but to invite them into learning what they want their own recovery process to look like. What I think this model and this approach also can give us is a sense really of hope. There's so many reasons that people get involved with some kinds of compulsive processes. If you're in a marginalized community, you're a person of color, you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. There's been so many times you've been on the receiving end of discrimination, of rejection, of isolation, alienation. How do you navigate that? What do you do when to navigate that? What can the clinician do to work with someone to feel more empowered around how they can cope with those situations? So someone who's grown up in families or has long histories of addictive behaviors in their family, they can feel hopeless, like, oh, my dad's an alkie, I'm going to be an alkie, this is how it works, this is how it goes in our family, there isn't a way out. You know, so that's another kind of set of issues that someone's navigating. And what I like about this model is helping someone feel a sense that of hope and that there is a way out. So I hope to see you in this workshop. We will cover again IFS basic concepts. We'll cover how IFS approaches addictive processes, and we'll include some experiential exercises so you can just check this out and see what you think about it. We will have discussion, we'll have Q&A. I have a sort of informal approach. I have lots of content that I'll share with you, but I also want to be available for your questions and comments while we kind of piece this through together. The last piece I'll say is that I do have a book coming out. It's available for pre-order now, available to you March 1st, which is coming right up through Amazon, called Internal Family Systems Therapy for Addictions. You can also check that out, perhaps even before the workshop, or perhaps you want after the workshop, you can check it out if you find that this is something that appeals to you. So there's a couple different ways that you can find out more about IFS. I also recommend you go to the Internal Family Systems, IFSI, Internal Family Systems Institute website. You can gain some information there about IFS as well. Thank you again to Liam and to the people at PCPSI for inviting me to be a part of your seminars. And I hope to see many of you in April. Thanks so much.